June 6, 1944. Normandy, France. The relentless rain transforms the battlefield into a sea of mud and blood. Private James Miller crawls through the underbrush, his fingers trembling against the trigger of his M1 Garand. The 29th Infantry Division had been waiting for this moment. The perfect ambush on an unsuspecting German convoy delivering crucial intelligence to Wehrmacht command. Through his binoculars, Lieutenant Thomas Hayes scans the fog-shrouded country road. Sweat mingles with rainwater on his face as he turns to the radio operator, Sergeant Frank Cooper. Radio check. All units confirm positions, Hayes whispers, his voice barely audible over the distant rumble of artillery. Cooper adjusts the dials on the SE-300 radio, the Army's newest field communication device, hailed as technological genius. His fingers leave muddy prints on the metal casing. "Sir, I'm getting interference," Cooper mutters, desperation creeping into his voice. Hayes glances at his watch. 5 minutes until the German convoy arrives. His men are scattered across a half-mile stretch of dense woodland, 20 soldiers with orders to strike simultaneously. Without radio communication, the ambush would collapse into chaos. "Fix it, Cooper. Now." Hayes hisses. The radio emits only static, a harsh, unforgiving sound that seems to grow louder with each passing second. In the distance, the unmistakable growl of German transport vehicles approaches. Miller locks eyes with Hayes across the clearing, silently asking the question that hangs heavy in the air. "Are we still a go?" Hayes hesitates, the weight of 20 lives resting squarely on his shoulders. The radio, their lifeline, their salvation, has become their undoing. 6 months earlier, Camp Kilmer, New Jersey. A makeshift training ground transformed ordinary men into soldiers. Lieutenant Hayes stands before his newly assembled platoon, farmers, factory workers, school teachers, now wearing the uniform of the United States Army. Their eyes reflect a mixture of determination and fear. "Gentlemen," Hayes addresses them, "in Europe, communication is the difference between victory and defeat, between life and death." Among them sits Frank Cooper, a former radio technician from Philadelphia. His expertise with communications equipment earned him quick promotion to sergeant and radio operator for Hayes' platoon. "The Germans have ears everywhere," Hayes continues. "Their direction-finding equipment can locate a radio transmission within minutes. But we have something they don't." He gestures to the SE-300 backpack radio, the future of battlefield communication. Frequency hopping technology, nearly impossible to jam or intercept. Cooper examines the radio with reverent hands, appreciating its engineering but noting its complexity. "Sir, this requires extensive training. One wrong setting." "Then we train harder, Sergeant," Hayes interrupts. "Lives depend on it." The following weeks blur into a grueling routine. Dawn to dusk drills. Night operations in pouring rain. The men bond through shared hardship, particularly Hayes, Cooper, and Miller, who form an unlikely friendship despite their differences. Miller, a quiet farmer's son from Iowa, keeps a photograph of his fiancée, Catherine, in his breast pocket. One night, he shares his story with Hayes during a rare moment of respite. "We were supposed to marry last spring," Miller explains, his voice soft with remembrance. "Then Pearl Harbor happened." Hayes nods, understanding all too well. Before the war, he was completing his law degree at Columbia University. His own wedding plans with Elizabeth were indefinitely postponed when he enlisted. "We'll get home to them," Hayes promises, though uncertainty shadows his words. Cooper's story differs. A divorced radio engineer with no children, he enlisted to escape personal demons as much as to serve his country. His expertise with communications equipment made him invaluable, but his tendency toward perfectionism created tension during training. "It's not good enough to work most of the time," Cooper argues during one heated exchange with a superior officer. "In combat, most of the time gets men killed. As training intensifies, so do the stakes." Intelligence reports indicate the Allied forces are preparing for a major offensive in Europe. Hayes' platoon would be among the first waves, tasked with securing crucial communication lines behind enemy positions following the initial invasion. During their final training exercise, disaster strikes. Under simulated combat conditions, Cooper's radio malfunctions, resulting in a catastrophic failure that would have cost lives in actual combat. This isn't happening again, Cooper vows, working through the night to understand every circuit and connection in the SE-300. 2 weeks before deployment, Hayes receives their specific assignment, a high-risk operation to intercept German intelligence following the invasion. The success of this mission could alter the course of the Allied advance through France. "We've got one shot at this," Hayes tells his men. "One perfect ambush." If you're watching this video from anywhere in America, drop a comment below telling us which state you're from. We'd love to know where our history buffs are located. As the platoon boards the transport ship bound for England, Cooper carries not only the radio but the burden of 20 lives that will soon depend on his ability to maintain clear communications in the chaos of war. May 12, 1944. RAF Greenham Common, England. Lieutenant Hayes' platoon joins thousands of American troops preparing for the largest amphibious invasion in military history. The atmosphere crackles with nervous energy as Operation Overlord takes shape. In the communications tent, Cooper meticulously disassembles and reassembles his SCR-300 radio, checking each component with obsessive precision. His hands move with practiced efficiency, but his eyes betray growing doubt. "You're going to wear that thing out before we even hit the beaches," Miller jokes, watching from the entrance. Cooper doesn't smile. These new frequency crystals they've installed, they're untested in field conditions. The humidity tolerance is theoretical at best. "Everything about this invasion is theoretical," Hayes interjects, entering with a folder marked confidential. "Including our survival." He spreads a map across the table. Their mission details have arrived. Following the initial landings, Hayes' platoon will push inland to establish an observation post near St. Lo, intercepting German communications and, if opportunity presents, ambushing couriers carrying physical intelligence. Intel suggests the Germans are moving critical Panzer Division deployment plans by hand to avoid Allied interception, Hayes explains. "If we can capture those documents, we potentially save thousands of lives." Cooper studies the terrain with growing concern. The Bocage country is a communications nightmare. Dense hedgerows, limited line of sight. "Which makes your job the most important one in this platoon," Hayes says firmly. "Without coordination, we're just 20 men with rifles." As D-Day approaches, fractures appear within the unit. Private Wilson, a former Chicago police officer, challenges Hayes' leadership during a planning session. "With respect, Lieutenant, we're being sent on a suicide mission," Wilson argues. 20 men behind enemy lines, relying on experimental radio equipment? The confrontation escalates until Cooper intervenes unexpectedly. "The mission is sound," Cooper states, surprising everyone with his defense of Hayes. "And the equipment will work, because I'll make damn sure it does." This show of confidence temporarily restores morale, but privately, Cooper confesses his concerns to Hayes. "If there's heavy rainfall, if we're near high-voltage lines, if the Germans are using newer jamming technology..." Cooper's voice trails off. "There are too many variables." "War is nothing but variables, Sergeant," Hayes responds. "We adapt." June 5, 1944. The invasion is delayed 24 hours due to poor weather conditions. The platoon spends the nervous evening before deployment engaged in quiet rituals. Miller writes a letter to Catherine. Cooper performs one final maintenance check on the radio. Hayes studies the maps until every contour line is committed to memory. That night, Hayes discovers Cooper still awake at 2 a.m., modifying the radio with parts scavenged from other equipment. "What are you doing, Sergeant?" "Improving our odds," Cooper responds without looking up. "I've bypassed the standard oscillator and installed a more stable crystal from the RAF stock." "Is that authorized?" Cooper's hands pause briefly. "No, sir. But it'll work better." Hayes hesitates, then nods. "Carry on." The following morning, they join the invasion force. The Channel crossing is brutal, men vomiting from seasickness, prayers murmured between clenched teeth. As their landing craft approaches Omaha Beach, reality shatters any remaining illusions of glory. The water turns red. Men scream. Cooper's radio takes a glancing bullet, but miraculously continues functioning as they fight their way inland. By nightfall of D-Day +1, only 16 of their original 20 remain. Wilson is among the dead, killed while dragging a wounded comrade to safety, his earlier doubts forgotten in a final act of heroism. As they push toward their objective, intercepted German communications reveal an unexpected opportunity. A high-ranking officer will be traveling with crucial deployment plans exactly through their sector. This is it, Hayes tells his remaining men. The perfect ambush. Everything we've trained for. They establish positions along a country road, carefully coordinating fields of fire. Cooper sets up the radio at the command position, establishing contact with each squad. All units report readiness. Cooper confirms as the final checks are completed. Hayes nods with satisfaction. History happens tomorrow, gentlemen. If you're enjoying this story of communication challenges during World War II, please hit that subscribe button and like this video. We're trying to reach 1,000 subscribers to keep bringing you these detailed historical narratives. That night, as rain begins to fall, Cooper makes a fateful decision. Concerned about water damage, he applies his unauthorized modification to improve the radio's weather resistance, a modification that would have catastrophic consequences when they need it most. June 6, 1944. 0630 hours. The rain intensifies, transforming the Norman countryside into a treacherous quagmire. Lieutenant Hayes' platoon lies in wait, their ambush position meticulously crafted along a winding country road flanked by dense hedgerows. As Cooper frantically works to restore radio communication, the sound of approaching vehicles grows louder. Hayes finds himself facing an impossible decision: abort the mission that could save countless Allied lives, or proceed without coordination, risking his men's lives in chaotic crossfire. 2 minutes. Miller whispers from his position, his rifle trained on the bend in the road. Hayes makes his decision. Using hand signals visible only to the closest men, he initiates an emergency plan. Runners will sprint between positions, relaying commands at grave personal risk. Private Donovan, Hayes orders, relay to positions 3 and 4, hold fire until my signal flare. Go! The young soldier disappears into the underbrush just as the first German vehicle, a Kubelwagen carrying officers, rounds the bend. Cooper suddenly freezes, staring at his modified radio. The crystals, he mutters in horrified realization. My modifications are causing a harmonic interference with our own equipment. Before Cooper can explain further, the convoy enters the kill zone, 2 staff cars, followed by a communications truck and armored transport. Through his binoculars, Hayes confirms their primary target, a German Oberstleutnant carrying a leather document case handcuffed to his wrist. The intel is there, just as predicted. Donovan hasn't returned. Positions 3 and 4 remain uninformed. Half the platoon waits for a radio command that will never come, while the other prepares for Hayes' visual signal. In this fractured moment, Miller makes a decision that alters everything. Seeing a German soldier scanning the hedgerows, nearly spotting one of their hidden men, Miller takes the shot without waiting for orders. The crack of his rifle shatters the morning stillness. Chaos erupts. The Germans respond with immediate and overwhelming firepower. Machine guns mounted on the transport vehicles spray the hedgerows with devastating effect. Now, all positions open fire. Hayes shouts, launching his signal flare belatedly into the rain-darkened sky. But the damage is done. Without coordinated fire, the ambush devolves into a disjointed attack. The men at positions 3 and 4, still waiting for radio confirmation, join late and out of sequence. Cooper abandons the useless radio and grabs his rifle, joining the firefight. It's my fault, he screams over the deafening exchange. The modification, I created a self-jamming feedback loop. A German grenade lands near Hayes' position. Without hesitation, Private Simmons throws himself on it, the explosive thud and sudden silence marking his sacrifice. The battle intensifies. Miller, seeing the Oberstleutnant attempting to escape with the document case, breaks cover to pursue. 3 German soldiers cut him down with concentrated fire, his body crumpling mere feet from his objective. Miller! Hayes shouts, witnessing his friend fall. Rage overtaking caution, he charges the German position, Cooper following close behind. What follows is a desperate close-quarters struggle. Hayes takes a bullet to the shoulder but continues fighting. Cooper, the radio technician who never considered himself a fighter, engages in hand-to-hand combat with a German officer twice his size. In the midst of the bloodshed, Hayes reaches the Oberstleutnant, who raises his Luger with deadly intent. A shot rings out, but it's Cooper who has fired, saving Hayes' life while sustaining a severe wound to his abdomen. The skirmish ends as quickly as it began. 7 Americans dead, the rest wounded to varying degrees. All Germans eliminated. Hayes kneels beside the dying Cooper, who clutches the blood-soaked front of his uniform. The documents? Cooper gasps. Did we get them? Hayes holds up the leather case, now detached from its owner's severed wrist. We got them. Worth it then, Cooper says, his voice fading. The radio. I should have trusted the original design. My arrogance. You couldn't have known, Hayes insists, applying futile pressure to Cooper's wound. Tell them. Cooper's eyes begin to lose focus. Tell them it was equipment failure. Official record. Not my unauthorized modifications. That's exactly what happened, Hayes affirms, gripping his friend's hand as life slips away. Equipment failure. Nothing more. As the survivors regroup, Hayes opens the case, confirming they've captured detailed Panzer Division deployment plans, intelligence that will indeed save thousands of Allied lives in the coming weeks. But as he looks at the bodies of Cooper, Miller, and the others scattered across the muddy road, Hayes wonders about the cost of this victory and how a single technical failure, born of one man's well-intentioned perfectionism, could unravel even the most perfect ambush. July 1944. A military hospital near Portsmouth, England. Lieutenant Hayes sits on the edge of his bed, arm in a sling, reading the official commendation for his platoon's actions. The citation praises their extraordinary heroism in capturing crucial enemy intelligence despite catastrophic equipment failure. The words ring hollow. The technical report on the SE-300 malfunction makes no mention of Cooper's unauthorized modifications. Instead, it blames environmental factors and enemy countermeasures, a convenient fiction preserving both Cooper's reputation and the Army Signal Corps' pride in their genius radio. Hayes folds the paper carefully, tucking it into his journal alongside the letters he's written to the families of his fallen men. Each letter contains carefully constructed truths. Their sons, husbands, and brothers died heroically. What he omits are the preventable circumstances of their deaths. For Miller's fiancée Catherine, Hayes has rewritten his letter 7 times, unable to find words adequate to convey both Miller's courage and the futility of his final charge. The photograph of Catherine, recovered from Miller's blood-soaked pocket, stares accusingly from Hayes' nightstand. Lieutenant Hayes? A nurse interrupts his thoughts. You have a visitor. Colonel Lawrence Richardson, Army Intelligence, enters with purpose in his stride. Without preamble, he places a folder on Hayes' bed. The intelligence your men died for, Richardson explains. Thought you deserved to know the impact. Hayes opens the folder. Inside are operational maps showing how the captured Panzer deployment plans fundamentally altered the Allied strategy in Normandy. Conservative estimates suggest your platoon saved over 15,000 American and British lives, Richardson continues. The Germans were planning a concentrated counteroffensive that would have caught us completely unprepared. Hayes absorbs this information with complex emotions. At the cost of 11 of my men. 11 for 15,000. Richardson responds with the cold calculus of war. That's the equation we live with. After Richardson leaves, Hayes struggles with this utilitarian arithmetic. In the abstract, the exchange seems justified. But Hayes had known those 11 men, their dreams, their fears, their unfinished lives. No strategic victory could fill the void left by their absence. 2 weeks later, Hayes receives transfer orders, a staff position far from the front lines. His combat days are over. The Army, it seems, considers his platoon's story finished. But for Hayes, it has only begun to unfold. September 1944. New York City. Elizabeth meets Hayes at Grand Central Station, her initial joy at his return quickly tempered by the realization that the man who left is not the man who returned. The physical wounds have largely healed, but Hayes carries invisible damage. "Thomas, talk to me," she pleads after yet another night of him waking in cold sweat, reliving the ambush. They're calling it a success, Hayes finally confides. A textbook operation with acceptable losses. But you don't see it that way. I see Cooper's face when he realized his modification caused the radio failure. I see Miller charging the German position because our coordinated plan collapsed. I see, his voice breaks. Elizabeth takes his hands. What would Cooper want you to do with this burden? The question lingers, unanswered but transformative. December 1944. Iowa. Hayes stands on the doorstep of a modest farmhouse, gathering courage before knocking. The door opens to reveal Catherine Miller, James' fiancée, her expression shifting from confusion to recognition. "Lieutenant Hayes." "Mrs. Miller, I mean Miss Donovan," Hayes corrects himself. "I wanted to return this in person." He extends the photograph of her that Miller carried until his death. She invites him in, and over coffee, Hayes does what his official letters could not. He tells her the complete truth about James, his courage, his doubts, his final moments. He explains the radio failure, Cooper's misguided modification, the cascading consequences. "James never fired without orders before that day," Hayes explains. "He saw a German soldier about to discover one of our positions and made a split-second decision to protect his fellow soldier." Catherine listens silently, tears streaming down her face. When Hayes finishes, she asks simply, "Did his death matter?" "Yes," Hayes answers without hesitation. "The intelligence we captured changed the course of the campaign." What follows is not the absolution Hayes sought, but something more valuable: shared grief, honest conversation about loss and purpose in war's senseless arithmetic. Before leaving, Hayes asks Catherine's permission to establish a scholarship in James' name at the local high school. Not as compensation, he clarifies. As continuation. January 1945. Philadelphia. Hayes locates Cooper's ex-wife, delivering personal effects and a different version of truth. She reveals that their divorce stemmed from Cooper's perfectionism becoming obsession. His inability to accept good enough, destroying their marriage just as it ultimately contributed to his death. "Frank always believed he could improve anything," she explains. "Even military equipment designed by hundreds of engineers. His modifications usually worked," Hayes offers. "Until they didn't," she responds. "That was always the risk." February 1945. Washington, D.C. Hayes, now working at the Pentagon, uses his position to influence the development of next-generation field radios. In meetings with Signal Corps engineers, he repeatedly emphasizes simplicity, reliability, and foolproofing against well-intentioned field modifications. "Design it assuming someone will try to improve it," he insists. "Because they will." His persistence irritates some but resonates with many. Gradually, his experiences reshape training protocols for communications personnel, emphasizing the dangers of unauthorized equipment modifications regardless of technical expertise. May 8, 1945. Victory in Europe Day. As celebrations erupt across America, Hayes sits alone in his office, writing his final letter to the families of his fallen platoon members. Not an official communication, but a personal one, sharing what he's learned through his journey. "Our mission succeeded not because of perfect planning or superior technology, but because of the human capacity for adaptation and sacrifice in the face of failure. Your sons, husbands, and brothers taught me that victory isn't achieved through flawless execution, but through resilience when plans inevitably falter. Their legacy lives on not just in the lives they saved, but in how their experience is reshaping the way we train, equip, and prepare those who will follow." The letter represents Hayes' hard-won understanding that in war as in life, perfect is the enemy of good enough, and that human judgment, with all its flaws, remains more valuable than technological genius that fails at the critical moment. June 6, 1954. Normandy, France. A decade after the fateful ambush, Thomas Hayes stands before a small, unmarked stone he personally commissioned near the site where his men fell. Elizabeth waits respectfully at a distance as Hayes kneels to place 11 polished stones in a row, a Jewish tradition of remembrance he learned from Private Steinman's family. The countryside has healed, green and peaceful where blood once soaked the earth. Hayes has changed too, gray at his temples, lines etched around his eyes, the visible weight of experience balanced by the wisdom it brought. His nightmares have largely subsided, replaced by a more complex relationship with memory. He no longer sees only the horror of that rain-soaked morning, but also the courage, the split-second decisions, the humanity that emerged in extremis. Rising to his feet, Hayes touches the unmarked stone one final time. "Perfect doesn't exist in war," he whispers. "Only in remembering why we fought." The SCR-300 radio design was eventually modified based partly on Hayes' recommendations, incorporating safeguards against field alterations. The improved version served reliably through the Korean War, saving countless lives through dependable communication. Cooper's legacy, though his name appears nowhere in the technical specifications. As Hayes and Elizabeth walk back to their waiting car, he pauses to look back at the peaceful Norman hedgerows. The perfect ambush that had rippled through time, altering not just the immediate battle but the approach to battlefield communication for a generation of soldiers who would never know the men who died there. In war's unforgiving arithmetic, 11 lives had indeed saved thousands. But Hayes had learned that each life was more than a number. It was a universe of connections, dreams, and possibilities. Their sacrifice wasn't measured only in strategic outcomes, but in how it transformed those who carried their memory forward. If you've been moved by this story of sacrifice, miscalculation, and redemption during one of history's pivotal moments, please subscribe to our channel for more untold stories from the battlefield. Hit that like button to help us reach more history enthusiasts like yourself. Comment below with other World War II communications failures you'd like us to explore in future videos. History isn't just about tactics and technology, it's about the human element that defines every victory and defeat. Join us next week as we continue to uncover the personal stories behind the strategic decisions that shaped our world.